They're here, 2013 Sequoyah book nominations. 90 Miles to Havana by Enrique Flores Galbis. When Julian's parents make the heartbreaking decision to send him and his two brothers away from Cuba to Miami via the Pedro Pan operation, the boys are thrust into a new world where bullies run rampant and it's not always clear how best to protect themselves. A Crack in the Sky by Mark Peter Hughes. 13-year-old Eli Papadopoulos is worried. Even though he's a member of the most powerful family in the world, even though his grandfather founded Infinicorp, the massive corporation that runs everything in the bustling dome cities, even though Infinicorp ads and billboards are plastered everywhere proclaiming, "Don't worry, Infinicorp is taking care of everything." Recently, Eli noticed that there's something wrong with the artificial sky. It keeps shorting out, displaying strange colors and random images. And though the Department of Cool and Comfortable Air is working overtime, the dome city is hotter than it's ever been. Eli has been raised to believe that the dome cities are safe, that the important thing is to keep working and consuming, and that everyone is secure and comfortable in Infinicorp's capable hands. But now he begins asking questions. All of a sudden, operatives from a dangerous band of terrorists keep contacting him. The friends of Gustavo, or Foggers, want to tear down everything Infinicorp has created. They promise Eli that they have the truth he seeks, if he's brave enough to handle it. Eli isn't convinced, and he's about to find out that in the dome cities, being a Papadopoulos isn't even enough to save a rule breaker like him from being sent far away to learn right thinking. In his new home, the Tower, Eli meets Tabitha, once at the top of her internship class, now a forgotten slave. Together, and with help from Eli's beloved pet mongoose Marilyn, they just might be able to escape and try to make a life for themselves in the scorched wilderness outside the domes. After Ever After by Jordan Sonnenblick. Jeffrey isn't a little boy with cancer anymore. He's a teen who's in remission, but life still feels fragile. The after effects of treatment have left Jeffrey with an inability to be a great student or to walk without limping. His parents still worry about him, and his older brother Stephen lost it and took off to Africa to be in a drumming circle and find himself. Jeffrey has a little soul-searching to do, too, which begins with his escalating anger at Stephen, an old friend who is keeping something secret, and a girl who is way out of his league but who thinks he's cute. Blindsided by Priscilla Cummings. In many ways, Natalie O'Reilly is a typical 14-year-old girl, but a routine visit to the eye doctor produces devastating news. Natalie will lose her sight within a few short months. Suddenly, her world is turned upside down. Natalie is sent to a school for the blind to learn skills such as Braille and how to use a cane. Outwardly, she does as she's told. Inwardly, she hopes for a miracle that will free her from a dreaded life of blindness. But the miracle does not come, and Natalie ultimately must confront every blind person's dilemma. Will she go home to live scared, or will she embrace the skills she needs to make it in a world without sight? The Danger Box by Blue Ballier. A boy in a small town who has a different way of seeing. A curious girl who doesn't belong. A mysterious notebook. A missing father. A fire. A stranger. A death. These are just some of the things you'll find within the Danger Box. Open with care. The Grimm Legacy by Polly Schulman. Elizabeth has a new job at an unusual library, a lending library of objects, not books. In a secret room in the basement lies the Grimm collection. That's where the librarians lock away powerful items straight out of the Brothers Grimm fairy tales. 7-league boots, a table that produces a feast at the blink of an eye, Snow White's stepmother's sinister mirror that talks in riddles. But when the magical objects start to disappear, Elizabeth embarks on a dangerous quest to catch the thief before she can be accused of the crime, or captured by the thief. The Nightmares by Dan Pawlowski. Timothy July has been having nightmares about his brother who is in a coma after being wounded in Iraq, about his best friend Stuart, who is behaving like a jerk, about the old biology specimens in jars lining the walls of his classroom, and about Abigail, the new girl who seems to be a magnet for trouble. Or perhaps she's the cause. Suddenly, Timothy's nightmares are coming true. His brother, his face decaying, approaches Timothy on the street. Stuart ends up in the hospital, terrified that monsters are stalking him, and the specimen jars are tormenting not only Timothy, but his teacher as well. One Crazy Summer by Rita Williams Garcia. 11-year-old Delphine has it together. Even though her mother, Cecile, abandoned her and her young sisters, Vanetta and Fern, 7 years ago. Even though her father and Big Ma will send them from Brooklyn to Oakland, California to stay with Cecile for the summer. And even though Delphine will have to take care of her sisters as usual and learn the truth about the missing pieces of the past. When the girls arrive in Oakland in the summer of 1968, Cecile wants nothing to do with them. She makes them eat Chinese takeout dinners, forbids them to enter her kitchen, and never explains the strange visitors with afros and black berets who knock on her door. Rather than spend time with them, Cecile sends Delphine, Vanetta, and Fern to a summer camp sponsored by a revolutionary group, the Black Panthers, where the girls get a radical new education. Set during one of the most tumultuous years in recent American history, One Crazy Summer is the heartbreaking and funny tale of 3 girls in search of the mother who abandoned them. Saving Sky by Diane Stanley. Although the country is at war, terrorists strike at random, and widespread rationing is in effect, 13-year-old Sky Brightman is remarkably untouched by it all. She and her family live off the grid on 60 acres of rural New Mexico ranch land with chores to do, horses to ride, and no television or internet to bring disturbing news into their home. But when a string of mysterious arrests begin and Sky's new friend Kareem becomes a target, she is finally forced to confront the world in all its complexity. With courage, ingenuity, and fierce determination, Sky meets injustice head-on and shows the tremendous impact one person can have on her community. Scrawl by Mark Schulman. Todd Munn is a bully. He's tough, but times are even tougher. The wimps have stopped coughing up their lunch money, the administration is cracking down. Then, to make things worse, Todd and his friend get busted doing something bad. Something really bad. Lucky Todd must spend his daily detention in a hot, empty room with Mrs. Woodrow, a no-nonsense guidance counselor. He doesn't know why he's there, but she does. Todd's punishment? To scrawl his history in a beat-up notebook. He can be painfully funny and he can be brutally honest. But can Mrs. Woodrow help Todd stop playing the bad guy before he actually turns into one? For real? It's 1962, a year after the death of Sam's father, and Sam and her mother must move back to Jackson, Mississippi, her father's conservative hometown. Needless to say, they don't quite fit in. People fear that Sam, her mother, and her mother's artist friend Perry are in the South to agitate and to shake up the dividing lines between black and white and blur it all to gray. As racial injustices ensue, sit-ins and run-ins with secret white supremacists, Sam learns to focus with her camera lens to bring social injustice out of the darkness and into the light. The Dead Boys by Royce Buckingham. In the desert town of Richland, Washington, there stands a giant sycamore tree. Horribly mutated by nuclear waste, it feeds on the life energy of boys that it snags with its living roots. And when Teddy Matthews moves to town, the tree trains its sights on its next victim. From the start, Teddy knows something is very wrong with Richland. Every kid he meets disappears before his eyes. A trip to the cemetery confirms that these boys are actually dead and trying to lure him to the tree. But that knowledge is no help when Teddy is swept into the tree's world, a dark version of Richland from which there is no escape. Warriors in the Crossfire by Nancy Flood. The novel opens with friends Joseph and Kento fending off a shark attack while spearfishing in the middle of the night, a gripping scene that isn't even close to the book's most intense sequence. Set on the island of Saipan at the end of World War II, This is the story of natives who were caught between the ruthlessness of the Japanese and American armies. Joseph is the son of a chief, while Kinto's father is one of the occupying Japanese. Go ahead, Japanese and Americans, greedy bullies, battle it out and leave so we can have our island back, Joseph thinks. But when the fighting does finally arrive, the consequences are well beyond anything he could have dreaded. Conflicted yet determined, Joseph is an ideal mix for a story of heroism. He wants to be a warrior like his ancestors, but in these horrific circumstances that means persevering through, not facing death and destruction head-on. Saving his family comes down to finding a bit of fresh water while in hiding, or being lucky enough to catch a stray bullet. And afterward describes the real-life account of what happened on Saipan, where almost all of the Japanese soldiers were killed, and duty-bound Japanese civilians were rounded up to take their own lives by jumping off what is now known as Suicide Cliff. Woods Runner by Gary Paulson. Samuel, 13, spends his days in the forest hunting for food for his family. He has grown up on the frontier of a British colony, America, far from any town or news of the war against the king that American patriots have begun near Boston. But the war comes to them. British soldiers and Iroquois attack. Samuel's parents are taken away prisoners. Samuel follows, hiding, moving silently, determined to find a way to rescue them. Each day he confronts the enemy and the tragedy and horror of this war. But he also discovers allies, men and women working secretly for the patriot cause. And he learns that he must go deep into enemy territory to find his parents, all the way to the British headquarters, New York City.